No matter what people say or think about you, you are a child, you are a child of God, and there is no thing or no one who can separate. They can't separate you from the truth that you're someone, you are family, you are meant to be a child of God. Oh, you are a child of God. No matter what the world says or thinks about me, I am a child, I am a child of God. No matter what the church says, decisions, pronouncements on you, you are a child, you are a child of God, and there is no thing or no one who can separate. They can't separate you from the truth that you're someone, you are family,
Good evening to you, friends, and welcome to this virtual webinar event on how to build a hybrid worship experience. My name is the Reverend Chad Abbott, and I am the conference minister for the Indiana-Kentucky Conference of the United Church of Christ. I want to welcome you, whether you are a layperson or a clergy from our conference, or whether you are here with us tonight on YouTube as one of our siblings in Christ across the denomination. And we certainly hope that this two-part event will be a helpful resource for your congregation and ministry wherever it is that you are serving God. You know, friends, this past year we've been through a struggle in discerning how to best be present to the work of ministry in our churches while also doing our part in loving our neighbors so that they can remain safe during this global health pandemic. I want you to know that I've been praying for you, and I know just how hard it has been for us as communities and for our collective and individual mental health. We've just been through so much and lost people that we love, so I wanted just to acknowledge that tonight and our collective grief for this moment. But we are seeing glimmers of hope with the rollout of this vaccine. In fact, tomorrow I get my second shot, which I'm really excited about. And I can imagine that you and many in your church have made this step as well. And now, as our congregations are beginning to take steps towards a more in-person experience again, there are lingering questions that remain on how we best serve all of God's people, those that are going to be in person and those that aren't quite comfortable coming yet. If there is one thing that I have learned through this pandemic, it is that the church will never go back to what once was prior to the pandemic. We have learned to adapt, we have learned to shift, we learned to discern, and to listen to all of our members and our guests. And so most of us are aware that the worship experience has now been changed forever, and that we need to be present to that change with a sense of mission and clarity for how we will be faithful to our gospel call. And so that's why we are all here tonight to explore that together. And tonight, while we won't have every question answered or have a magic solution really for every circumstance and solution, we are committed to offering you all an opportunity to glean from some expertise in our conference setting. The Indiana-Kentucky Conference mission is to live in covenant, connecting and equipping local ministries to love and serve like Jesus. Tonight we live into that connecting and equipping as we hear from one of our own, Troy Valpel, as he shares his expertise as someone who works regularly on video production and editing and has developed fully virtual and hybrid worship for his congregation in Evansville. Troy is a lay member at Bethlehem UCC in Evansville, and we are so blessed to have his wisdom sharing with us tonight. But before I turn this over to you, Troy, I simply wanted to share that as a part of this experience, we just ask you all that you remain on mute throughout the entire session. We will have a small section for question and answer near the end, and that'll be handled through our chat feature. But we just want to thank you for helping us to make this the most optimal experience by remaining on mute. And with that, Troy, I want to let you take it from here.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you, Chad. That was a wonderful introduction, and I really appreciate the kind words that you said, and I agree with you completely. I'm so happy to see so many people here tonight. I know many of you are all of the same mindset of, okay, what are we going to do and what are the next steps? And it's a conversation our church has had multiple times over the past year. And I'm going to share with you tonight just kind of the beginning steps of what that looks like. Tonight, we'll take a good look at, okay, we're going to do this, and how do we get that started going? And then next week, we'll look more closely at, the technology that goes along with it. There's a lot I want to talk about tonight, so I don't want to give a lot of time to the background of it. But for our church, we went virtual in March of last year and immediately went to pre-producing our worship service to push to YouTube and our website each week. Over the course of that, and immediately the conversation began, well, we could come back in person at any moment. We need to be ready to live stream for those who want to stay home and protect themselves from the pandemic. So we need to be ready to go at a moment's notice. We were real fortunate that we have a trust within our church that had wanted to invest in a tech upgrade. We were in the process of looking through that before the pandemic began. So we had identified live streaming as an option, and it was down the road on the plan, but then the pandemic moved it right at the top of the list. So we were able to push through and get that installed. And we had that ready to go August, September of last year, and it's just been kind of sitting there waiting for that moment to go live. I'm happy to share that our congregation has begun in-person worship. We started on April 11th, so we've had 2 live streaming plus in-person hybrid worships. I'd love to report that first week went off without a hitch, but as we'll talk about later, what do we do when it all goes awry? I'll explain our experiences with that. Just a little bit about what we're going to do tonight. Like Pastor Chad said, I'd love to give you all the perfect details and you just take them and go put them in place in your church and everything works out perfectly. But as we all know, every church is unique. Every church is different. Every congregation is different. What may work for Bethlehem and Evansville may not work for your church family. So what we're going to talk about are the principles, the ideas, the steps, the things to consider as you start putting all these things together to have your hybrid worship experience. And then you can take this template and modify it to your needs and have a successful worship experience. So without any further ado, let's get started. And there we go. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Thumbs up if you can. Okay. Okay, so if it's going to work, is this going to work for me? There it is. Okay, getting started. All right. The first thing I'm going to recommend for everyone is for you to build a team. Who should be a part of this team? Well, of course, your senior minister. Or if you're going to live stream multiple services, senior ministers. They put together the order of worship each week. So they're going to be able to identify, here are the things that are going to happen each week. Here are the things that are important that we focus on, that we make sure that we capture, and that we represent for both our in-person congregation, but also those viewing from home. Next is your church leadership. At Bethlehem, we refer to our elected leaders as church council. They're very important for a multitude of reasons. First of all, they're going to be the group that approves that you spend money on equipment. And it's important for them to understand everything that comes in together to live stream a service. I think a lot of people have watched live streams, but that's kind of the gap there. You don't really understand all the bells and whistles that need to be included to make that happen. With having them involved from the beginning, they understand that it takes cameras, microphones, computers, software, all those sorts of things. So then as things crop up down the road and you say, oh, well, gosh, we didn't consider this. We need to add a couple of $100 for a piece of equipment. They understand that. And that conversation doesn't get kind of mired down in, well, we thought we bought everything. Why do we need more to spend more now? Also, church leadership is really important because, as we all know, change within a church is sometimes not easily accepted. And they'll be able to advocate why we're doing this. It's not just a notion of, well, we're only doing this until the pandemic's over and everyone can be back under the church roof. This is a ministry that's going to grow. This is going to give us the opportunity to share our teachings and our ministry work well beyond our church walls. And it's something that we've wanted to do forever. And this is a tool in that arsenal. And they'll be able to advocate for that. And also to encourage other members of your congregation to advocate for as well. Next, and because I'm a part of this group, I'm going to say this is the most important group. This would be your tech savvy members. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you want a group of people that really understand all facets of technology. And it is important for it to be the more, the merrier. You're going to have a lot of different things coming together. And we'll talk more about the tools next week. But having people who understand how cameras work and audio works and IT works and those sort of things, you're going to have a lot of people giving feedback, input, putting all those pieces together. But really why having a large group of these individuals is important is because once you start live streaming, you're probably going to be live streaming the rest of the rest of your church life. So having a large group that can, spread that work, have weekends off to maybe go just sit in the pew and enjoy worship, that really helps a lot. And then the last person that I just added, and we'll talk more about why this person is important a little bit later, is somebody in this group should be an attorney, specifically a copyright attorney. Okay. This one is vital. You want to, as a group, determine what are your goals. As an independent video producer, anytime anyone comes to me and says, hey, Troy, I want to hire your company to produce a video. Sure, that sounds great. I always ask them these two questions. What do you want people to take from viewing your video? And then once they're done watching it, what do you want them to do after? If it's a retail client, it's pretty obvious. Hey, we want to advertise this product for this price. And at the end of watching it, we want them to come to our store or go online and buy it and potentially buy other things. If it's a nonprofit, we want to educate people about what our nonprofit does. And at the end of the video, we want them to either volunteer, donate, advocate. This is really important. And this step right here is going to impact everything you do beyond this. You want to think about what do you want in-person and virtual viewers to experience during your worship, but more importantly, what do you want them to do after the worship? We talk about a lot of times in the church about how we want people to live the life and live the teachings, not just an hour a week. And we can have that conversation directly with people that are in person, encourage them to do that. But how do we do that with somebody who's not physically in the room? And it's really important that we draft our hybrid worship to address those virtual viewers as well. What do we want them to do after worship? Do we want them to come to our website and learn more about our church? Do we want them to reach out to our minister or our youth minister or our youth group? What are those things we want those people who are watching from afar to become connected to be a part of our church family? And this list can be really big. And it can be a list that, hey, we're going to start here and then we're going to grow on it. Or it could start and just be a small list. But then as you move through this process, you become more comfortable with doing a hybrid worship. You can always come back to this and you can modify it. You can review it. And I encourage you to do that. Okay. So determine the structure of your worship service. As Pastor Chad said in the beginning, everything's changed. With video being a part of this, everything's changed. And that is a good thing because it gives us an opportunity to look at what we've done good, but how do we take it further? So out the gate, your group may decide, do we just want to do business as usual? Meaning we just hold worship and we have a camera up. So everybody who's watching worship from home just experiences it kind of like they're a fly on the wall. Is this the time to incorporate something new? Or is it, and then too, how do we add something for everyone? This is going to be radically different between everyone, okay? I'll share this with you. Our congregation right now, currently, this weekend will be our third weekend of live streaming our hybrid worship. So far, it is just typical worship. The only thing we're doing differently is that we're holding 2 worship services to allow for social distancing, and we're not singing in church. So there's no music. I'm sorry, there's music, there's just no singing. As we move through this process, eventually we'll start incorporate singing, which means like during our live stream, we'll have graphics on the screen for our virtual viewers at home to be able to sing along with us. But we started small. And even though I've been doing this for 20 years, I knew the first weekend, I wanted it to be really simple. I had 2 goals. I wanted to stream to our website, and I wanted to stream to YouTube, and I wanted it to go off without a hitch. First weekend, but this past weekend, it worked perfectly. And as we move along, we'll start adding those things. And a lot of the things we're talking about is, how do we engage our virtual audience? How do we get them to feel like they're a part of the service and not just a viewer from home? But some of you may decide out the gate, all we really want to do is just capture the essence of our service and maybe record our sermon or our message and just have that online. That's totally okay. And others may decide we want to do the whole hybrid thing right out the gate. That's good too. But determine what that structure of worship is going to be like, not just for the people who are there, but the people who are viewing at home. I've already gotten feedback from some of our viewers at home talking about things they'd like to see from being at home. And we're starting to have those discussions about, okay, how do we incorporate that and how do we make that exciting for everyone? Okay. As you're having these conversations, even though we're going to talk true equipment in the next one, it's very important to start considering those things in your initial meetings. The big question right at the gate is, well, where are we going to live stream the service? Are we going to push it to our church website? Are we going to go to YouTube? Are we going to go to Facebook? Are we going to do all of the above? Because that is a possibility. Currently, as I mentioned, we're streaming directly to our church website, but we're also pushing it to YouTube as well. And we're pushing it to YouTube for, those church shoppers. This is a great opportunity for people to learn about houses of worship with the safety of being from home, about that anxiety of, well, if I go in person, everybody's going to talk to me and want to get me involved and all that anxiety that comes with this. But being on YouTube, it gives that opportunity for them to really learn about your church and your church ministry work. And so I would consider potentially trying to live stream to 2 different places at the same time. The reason why I advocate for your church website is it's a safe place to stream to because of some copyright issues. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay. So once you have decided where do we want to stream to, you want to ask the question, do we have an existing infrastructure? What resources do we have at our disposal? How good's our internet? I highly encourage that whatever device you're using to live stream be connected to an Ethernet cable. Wi-Fi is reliable, and I've live streamed a lot of events via Wi-Fi, but I'll be honest with you, I'm always sitting on pins and needles wondering if the Wi-Fi is going to go out. Whereas if you're able to hardwire to an Ethernet connection, you're going to feel pretty confident that 99% of the time you're not going to have any problems. As far as equipment and technology, okay, do we have any equipment or technology that we can use for our live stream capabilities once we move into it? Do we have any video cameras? Do we have an audio board that we send audio to speakers in our house of worship? Most houses of worship have an audio setup. And the nice thing is that you can come right out of that audio board directly into your live streaming tech with just a cable. So that's pretty much set and done, but identify that. I was talking to a member of a congregation earlier today in Indianapolis, and as we were talking, he identified something I had forgotten about. And I was really grateful for that conversation because he talked about they're repurposing some of the tools they got from the grant that they received in November to purchase live streaming equipment. So cameras they were using for virtual worship production, they're going to use that as camera equipment for their live streaming. So make a list of everything that you have, because when we get into the tools segment, that really can take a lot of that initial expense out of purchasing things, but also more importantly, it gives you more opportunity to really enhance your virtual worship experience. Okay, and then lastly, what are we going to do with the virtual file afterwards? If you're recording to, or if you're sending to YouTube and you're live streaming through YouTube, the beauty of that is that YouTube automatically records your live stream and puts it on your playlist immediately after your worship. So that takes care of it. But let's just say, for argument's sake, you're only going to stream directly to your church website. You want to have something there to record your worship so you always have it. And I would recommend to you that you use this as a tool to market your worship experience, to push that to social media and encourage your membership to push it as well. We're always encouraging people to invite people to join us in worship. This is a great way to say, hey, I'm worshiping right now. Join me in worship as well right now via our live stream. But having that up there, and that also gives the resource if people want to go back later and listen to a special song or listen to a minister's sermon. By having that recording and then pushing it to your social media applications gives you a really great way to market your church beyond just Sunday worship time. The other beauty of this is if you're recording it locally to a hard drive, if your internet goes out during your worship, you have that recording, so then you can put it online later for people to join in. But like I said, we'll talk more about that a little bit later. All right, the big red scary screen here, copyright issues. I have this in red because this is important, but it's not to scare you. Anything you stream or post online is subject to copyright. Okay, what you want to consider is that anything you're incorporating, anything you're using in your live stream worship service, you want to make sure that you have the legal right to use it. The reason why this is very important is because if you are streaming to YouTube or Facebook, YouTube and Facebook use an internal software to check if you've got the right to use something that's in it, and that could include pictures or music. What makes this kind of challenging is that when you're live streaming something on YouTube, if YouTube says, hey, you're not legally allowed to use this, it will stop your live stream immediately. I've had this happen to me. The challenging thing about that as well is that with YouTube is once it stops a live stream, you have to restart the whole thing. You can't just pick it up and say, oops, I'm sorry, let me restart that. You have to create a whole new live stream. You have to push that out and hope that people kind of rejoin the live stream later. So at our church, we have our hymnal for music. Now we pay a subscription fee that gives us the right to perform that music inside our church sanctuary. When we started pre-producing our virtual worship service, this was my first question. And as I looked at our usage rights, it did not allow for us to use it in any online capabilities. There was an additional fee for that. So we had to go in and pay for that. And now, anytime I live stream, there's no issues. Okay. Now, I highly recommend that this is where the attorney from earlier comes in, get an expert, specifically someone who's kind of an expert on copyright law. These rules change frequently, and getting sued's not the big concern. Like I said, having content removed or potentially getting a copyright strike, which then bans you from live streaming for a while, can be your concern. Most houses of worship, this isn't a big issue because you're not a monetized, meaning you're getting paid for things you post on YouTube. But if you identify this early, it just removes that as a concern. But it is something I wanted to mention to you because sometimes a lot of people don't consider copyright as becoming an issue down the road. Okay, our virtual audience engagement. How do we encourage our virtual audience as effectively as our in-person congregation? I wish I had a great answer for that. It could be as easy as you're talking to everyone in person, is that you take a conscious effort to frequently turn to a camera and talk directly to the camera and even acknowledge your virtual audience. I'm talking here, but you turn to the camera and say, and for those of you working at home or watching at home, this is what we'd like you to do. When we did the pre-produced virtual worship service, we found ways all the time to get our church membership to participate in worship. We would ask people to take pictures of themselves watching, or I remember one year during Palm Sunday, we encouraged everyone to take pictures of themselves holding a flower, and we put together a slideshow to show in there so everyone could feel like they were a part of the service, and that way we could have our palm parade. We had greetings different times during the year where people would send in and say, we miss seeing you, but we're so happy that we can still participate in worship, even virtually. Start looking at ways that you can engage that church audience and make them feel like they're a part of it, and that you're talking to them and not at them. Okay. Another thing you want to do with your virtual audience engagement is encourage them to like and share the worship and encourage other people to watch. Like I said, you'll have several members of your congregation that will still be watching from home to protect themselves. Encourage them at the beginning of worship. If you're one of our church family, or if you're a guest and you're watching our service today, share it on social media. Share it, share it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you're doing. Encourage them to advocate and invite others to join you in worship. It's a great way to market your church. It's a great way to spread your message, and it's just beneficial. But also, too, that's giving them a call to action that makes them feel like they're doing something for their church. And then, how do we review and grow this aspect? One idea that we have is that we reach out to people and we encourage those who are watching our virtual services to reach out to us, let us know what they think. Let us know when they're watching. Like I said, post pictures of yourself watching on Facebook and tag our church in it. And again, to grow, encourage them to share the experience, to encourage others to watch. I identify this, I'm a marketing guy, I identify this as a great resource to really grow the impact of your church ministry. And as you continue to create more videos and live stream more hybrid experiences, you're going to have more and more people visiting your website or visiting your YouTube channel to learn more about your church. Okay. Is it working? Well, how do we measure success? Some people will tell you, look at analytical numbers, look and talk about how many people are landing on the site, how long are they watching, what parts of it are they watching. I'd like to take it a step further. What kind of feedback are you getting from your church family? Those people that are watching it online, are they connecting with you? Are they still reaching out and volunteering their time? Are they participating in any events that are going on within the church? Say, we're collecting food for a local food pantry. Are those virtual families feeling encouraged to come in and participate in that? Like I said, be sure to reach out to them, ask them, what do you think? What would you like to see? How would you like to be a part of this, even though you're away from us? But really measuring success, I think, again, kind of falls in line with the typical, how are we measuring success? What is our church engagement? Who are we seeing participating? Who are we seeing every Sunday? It's a little tricky in a virtual environment because, unless you're tracking IP addresses, it's hard to identify if Troy Voppel's coming to worship every Sunday. But the good thing about it is that if you were to post this to a YouTube, or you can go in every day and see how many more views you have from one day to the other. You can see, are we getting more likes? Are we getting more shares? If you have people sharing posts through Facebook where you're encouraging people to tune into this, you can track that way. But I think that you need to identify those ways for you to go out and look at that and see, is it working? How are things doing? When do we review it? I think reviewing and reflecting on what's working really falls on what you feel most comfortable with. As with anything in marketing, I always encourage, we're trying something new, let's start it, and we know we're going to do this for a long time. Let's try it for a set amount of time, then stop and review. With anything new, whether it's in advertising or anything of that nature, it takes a while for it to really take root and grow. So whatever you decide to do out the gate, this is what we're going to do for a set amount of time, and we're just going to stay with it, whether it's immensely successful or we get 2 views a week. And if we have 75 viewers the first week, and then the second week it's 50, and then the third week it's 35, stay to what you're doing. You'll see huge fluctuations in viewership, and that really it really won't reflect anything. It just could be that people are viewing it at their comfort level. And that's one of the things I meant to mention earlier. After this past year of virtual worship, everybody's gotten really used to worshiping at their own convenience. That's not a bad thing. It's nice to have that flexibility to live our lives, but yet still worship when it fits into our schedule. Be mindful of that, be mindful of the fact that if you live streamed one Sunday and like I said, you had 75 viewers, but then the following Sunday you only have 55. In between there, go back and look how many people watched it afterwards. You might see a much larger number are tuning in to view your hybrid worship Sunday evening, Monday during lunch, those sorts of things. I can tell you firsthand that when we went to a virtual worship, my wife was watching our virtual worship service during her lunch hour during the week. And I was producing it in an office right across the hall from her. So everyone's taking advantage of that flexibility and that ability to worship when they can. But it's important too that even though they're taking advantage of that, we still want to keep that connection. We don't want them to simply just worship when they're able and that be the end of it. We want them to worship, but we want them to be engaged and still an active participant in the congregation. And again, that's where that falls into that notion of, hey, share it, advocate for people to watch it, encourage people to watch with you, have watch parties, not in person, but join me and I'll be watching in my home, you watch in your home, that sort of thing. Okay. And then where do we go from here? We're seeing how these things are going. Do we need to modify those goals we identified earlier? Do we need to adjust that timeline? When we created our goals earlier, we talked about, well, we're going to do this for 4 or 5 weeks, and then we're going to do this for another 5 weeks. Do we need to stay in phase 1 for an extra 3 or 4 weeks? Are we doing so well that maybe we can move on to some of those elements and start incorporating those sooner? Always be having those conversations. And don't be afraid to try new things, and don't be afraid for things to fail. Things are going to fail. It happens, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. If you try something new and it falls really flat, say, okay, no big deal. We'll try it again some other time. As I mentioned earlier, we did a lot of things during our virtual worship service that did really well. And then we tried it again later and we didn't get the same sort of response. It could have been from anything. We didn't give up on it. We just waited a little bit longer before we tried it again. Okay. All right. So I actually got through that faster than I thought I would, which is great. It's going to leave more time for a little bit of a Q&A. But before we go to a Q&A, we're very lucky that we have a testimonial from a viewer who has been doing the hybrid worship for several weeks now. And at this point, I'd like to allow Jenna Myers to come on and talk about their experiences with hybrid worship. This falls in the line of what happens when it all goes south. I think Jenna didn't expect me to come to her as quickly as possible.
We're going to get in touch with Jana and make sure she knows.
Throw it back to me.
She's working. It's her turn. This was actually entirely planned, of course.
Absolutely. Again, what do you do when it all goes wrong? Well, you have a backup. You go back to this guy. I know I covered a lot tonight, and I know that it's a lot of theory and things of that nature. And I tried to go as quickly as possible because I was worried that I would run long and we wouldn't have a lot of time for Q&A. But it looks like Jana's back. Jana, are you ready? Give me a thumbs up if you're ready. Okay, now Jana's ready. And don't feel bad. Life happens.
I knew that was going to happen. I was like, you don't have a poop, do you? And then yes. And then I was like, they have got 2 more minutes in them. I'm sure they do. But like Troy said, life happens. So I'm Pastor Jana Myers. I serve at St. John in Cumberland, which is just on the east side of Indiana. This is Addie. She is one of our frequent live stream viewers. She does not attend church in person, but she is a weekly online attender with her dad and her brother. You guys may have a church similar to mine, which is not super wealthy, not super big, and not super full of like loads of tech people. But I will say that does not mean that this cannot be your story. Our church closed in March, like almost everybody. And we went on Facebook that very weekend on on my cell phone. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we were committed to being in fellowship with one another and giving it a shot. And so the first few weeks, that's what we did. And frankly, it was a disaster. We took like a microphone. First, it was just me shouting at the phone from across the sanctuary because I didn't know how to turn the soundboard on. And this tech guy we weren't going to ask him to come out of his house. We had just literally myself and the pianist, and it was a mess. And because God is good and the church is faithful, people logged on, and we were really honest. And we said, we don't know what we're doing. We need your help. And we chose the platform Facebook because that's where most of our members are. And we said, write in the comments, tell us if you can hear, if you can see, and they all wrote, we can't hear anything. So we like hooked up a microphone and just kind of pointed it at the camera of the phone and tried to figure it out that way. It's been a year and it's a lot different. We've been doing hybrid worship. We did hybrid worship last summer, and we've come back into hybrid worship for 7 weeks now. And what that has meant for us has been a process of cell phones, then iPads, then handheld camcorders. Then we were fortunate enough to get the Connect Through Tech grant with the Centers for Congregation. And so we did purchase some cameras with the idea of getting us online. One of the first things we decided when we did that was that this was going to be sort of like Troy said, this was a forever project. This was not a today get through the mix. This is how we're doing church now. The thing that I can say is that reminding your congregation that the moment you go live online, you are now 2 worship services. You are simultaneously experiencing worship in person if you're doing it in person, or online if you're online. But that remembering that whoever is experiencing you in one way, digital or physical, is not the universal experience anymore. When we were all online, it was really easy because everyone was online. That's what they were doing. When we were in person, it was all easy because everyone was in person. But trying to help our church understand that they are 2 churches in 2 spaces simultaneously, it's been really interesting. I will say we like the platform Facebook, not because we love what Facebook is about, but because that's where our membership is. And my advice to you is find out where your membership hangs out. If that's Instagram, if that's Twitter, if that's Facebook, if that's YouTube, if that's your own website, go where your people already are. It will make it so much easier for those who need that space to come on. Plus, your membership will be excited to share technology they know about with their friends. Nobody wants to evangelize something that they don't know about. I will tell you every minute of the week about how great my shoes are from Amazon because I have a million shoes from Amazon. But I'm not going to tell you about whatever was at Macy's because I haven't been in the store in a year. So use a platform that the majority of your membership is comfortable with. You can do that with like a super quick email, ask them to send it back. You can do it with actual paper mail. One of the ways that we have tried to stay connected is to send everything digital and paper version. Our congregation, although I had young children, most of the folks in my church are 70 plus. So we don't have a lot of young tech people. But I will tell you that they have all learned how to Zoom. They have all learned how to Facebook. Doesn't mean they've become Facebook members. Facebook has a feature that allows you to come in from the outside without logging in and joining. And that's a feature that I think is really helpful because it has allowed people who don't want to get invested in social media or that platform to still have access to your material. The other thing that I think can be really helpful is Troy listed in your team, one of your tech people in your congregation, even if they just like tech, they don't have to be like smart about it, they just enjoy it. Start a group maybe that you can call like tech stewards. We have somebody at every single worship service whose job it is to say hello to everyone who logs on. So if you log on, we'll ask you to say hi in the chat. And then someone will write back to you by name, hey, Jana, I'm so glad you're here. I make sure that I make a point of posting to the Facebook stream from the pulpit in church, because it's not the case that my Facebook congregation is not a real congregation. They're my real church. They're my real members. They're just in a different place. And I want to welcome them the same way I welcome everybody else. So I do that from the pulpit in front of all the people at church. I'm not a young millennial on my phone. I'm just welcoming church. We also have a way that whenever anybody posts a prayer request, we have different things we ask people to do. So we say post during the service, like different things, be connected, be involved. And that is mostly handled by a lay member, 2 different people who are willing to take a Sunday, and they does change their worship experience, but they basically welcome everybody, and they have different protocols. They don't do that during the sermon or during a prayer time. That way they can experience some of that for themselves. But that has made our online group really immersive. The one other thing I will say, and that's maybe because we're an older church, smaller, sort of half rural, half suburban, we don't get a lot of visitors. And you may not either, but we have had 6 different people join church since we've come back in 7 weeks, because they all started coming online during the pandemic. They were just surfing the internet and one of their friends was watching, so they clicked in to watch, and they decided they've all come to church and said, hey, it's our first Sunday here. We don't know anybody. And I said, so great. That's great for you. And they said, but we've been online for 3 months. We've been online for 6 months. We've been online with you since March. And that has been a really good reminder of why we're doing this. We're not doing this to get through the pandemic. We're doing this to have a new form of evangelism, a new form of reaching out, a new form of connecting with our community and reminding them that we're here, whether it's a pandemic or not. And one of the things we do specifically for our online group is on Wednesdays, we have online only events that only happen online to make that congregation still have a space that works for them. So Wednesdays we have a hymn sing. We also have a Wednesday fellowship that's just online. And then we did an online only Easter service. There was in person and hybrid, of course, but there was also some online stuff that was exclusively online. So we know that there are going to be a lot of things that are exclusively in person, and we want to make sure that we balance that with some exclusively online things. And then everywhere else, anything that happens in the sanctuary is now hybrid. I don't know if that's everything you want me to say, Troy. I will say whatever else you guys need or have questions about. I'm happy to talk more about St. John. We're a mess, but we're trying really hard to navigate this new adventure of church.
No, I think that was absolutely wonderful, Jana. And I'm going to be honest with you, at this point, I'm thinking maybe you should have hosted this, because you added some things that were tremendous to that. I mean, especially the notion of, the 2 experiences. And I think I thought about that, but just kind of took it for granted that's kind of thing. That's great. The other thing I think that was wonderful is to find out where your audience is. And I don't think we talked about that, and we just felt like, gosh, we have so many people that view our website. That's the easiest place to put it for our members. And that is what we were doing when we just did pre-producing our virtual worship service. The nice thing too about it being on your website is for the people that find it on YouTube, because we posted to YouTube, but then it played on our website as the link to YouTube. The nice thing is, as people watched it on YouTube, like you identified, you start having church guests find you on YouTube, but as they're watching it, they click on your website, they come to your website, they learn more, and they become more engaged. So that's a byproduct of that. But really the notion of knowing where your audience is tremendous. And our congregation is very much the same as Jana's. We're predominantly older congregation. We have, I'd say, gosh, easily we're 50% top heavy of 55 or older. So knowing where that audience is really good. And yeah, they pick up the paces pretty well. It was pretty surprising how they all picked up Zoom and how to find this and everything. And gosh, just so many notes I have from her speech, engaging that virtual audience. I tried to do that the first week. When I went to YouTube, welcomed everybody, encouraged them to engage in the chat. But I was trying to switch between all of our cameras, throw graphics up, make sure the live stream was working, and I totally forgot about that. So like she said, having people who are almost your ushers, greeters for your online audience is so beneficial. And wow, I have so much to go back to talk to our church family about this. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for that. We have a little bit of time left. I think it's great to open up for the Q&A now. And yeah, like they said, please drop a question in the chat. We'll read it out loud. I saw one, if we want to get to it. I know Monica asked about, talk a moment about hybrid Zoom and in person. Are you talking about like the actual Zoom interface? Give me a thumbs up if that's what you mean. No, it's not what you mean. Can you type a little bit? I want to make sure I address that how you mean. Okay, I'll go to Jonathan's question, then we'll come back to Monica's. If you're going through your church website directly, copyright is not a big as a concern. I can tell you that within our own church, we purchased everything and we went directly streaming to our website. So our software, our encoder is connected directly to our website through an embed code. It's complicated. I'll explain it more next week. So we're not going through YouTube and then directing back to that. So because it's not going through anything that's like looking at or listening to what we're putting up there, it's not a concern. The live stream is not going to get shut down. And as I mentioned, this past weekend, we live streamed our worship to YouTube and it went totally well. Now, here's the thing. If you have the copyright usage to use music online and YouTube decides to stop your live stream, you can actually upload your certificate of live stream to YouTube, and that'll take care of it. And like I said, most of the time, what'll happen is after you're done streaming to YouTube, when it records and posts it, you'll just see a little thing that says copyright claim. And we had some of those when we were doing virtual worship because we have a contemporary music performer who would submit music to me, and her music didn't fall under that. It still got posted. It was still there. It was okay. Okay, so it looks like being present to both Zoom congregation and live congregation and how to keep both engaged. Well, I don't know. I think Jenna hit that pretty hard. And I hope that she had a lot of great answers for that. Yeah, I think it's just finding that way to, like I said, speak directly to your virtual audience and speaking directly to your in-person audience. And as a minister, that's going to be a really challenging balancing act. It's like, how do you talk to this group and talk to this group? And I think you have to find a way to incorporate that and find ways to people to engage. And piggybacking off of what Jana said, maybe it's being in communication with your minister and saying, hey, we're back here in the chat and people are saying this and people are saying that, and sending a message to your minister that maybe your minister can talk about that. If someone has a prayer concern that they just thought of that morning, something happened locally or something of that nature, and you can just text your minister and say, during the prayer, can you talk about this? Those sort of things, or whoever's doing the speaking on camera, if you can give them information that's coming from that virtual audience that they can speak to directly, being in communication with that could help as well. It's a lot of it, I hate to say it, a lot of it's trial and error. And, and like Jana said, with our congregation being older, I've been attending our church since I was in high school. My wife is a lifelong member of the church. I didn't join until I was in my 40s after we'd been married a long time, but I've grown up in our church. So as I put our virtual worship services together, I knew what our congregation really wanted to see. They wanted to see the stained glass. They wanted to hear the organ playing. They wanted to see that worship. So I incorporated those elements because those virtual experiences were really just kind of for our members, to keep our members engaged during the pandemic. We have to look well far beyond that now that we're doing the hybrid worship. Like it was said, these are two experiences. And while we want the hybrid to be as close, or the virtual to be as close to watching in person as possible for our members who are still at home, we're also kind of promoting what our ministry work is about for a virtual audience. And your members of a team, and I meant to mention this earlier and I forgot about it, but real quickly, you want that to be a cross section of age groups. You want feedback from a lot of different age groups as to what do you like from the worship services. So as you're building this hybrid worship service, you're creating something that appeals to everyone of all ages. That doesn't mean dumb down your worship or just kind of, make it easy for everyone, but try to find ways for something that is appealing to people of all ages to grow that membership. It's important. And I hope that answers your question, Monica. I hope that helps. Okay. A church expected to budget for a hybrid worship. John, we're going to talk about that in much more detail next week. And the beauty of that, and I might just leave it at that to get you to come back next week. But in all honesty, the beauty of that is that there's so much technology out there and there's so many resources. There is the technology that's available to do it on a low budget. A lot of churches are going to talk about, well, we went out and bought cameras and switchers and encoders. There is free software out there that allows you to do live switching between graphics and cameras. So like I said, if you have cameras that you got from the grant money this past fall, you can incorporate those and immediately go to live streaming. You can do it like Jana said. You can do a Facebook Live from your phone. We'll talk about next week about the ability of, if you're going to use your phone, that you got about a 3-foot buffer of good audio. We're going to talk about that next week. But, it could be anywhere. Like I said, we were really fortunate that we had a trust involved that had a good amount of money. So we were able to go really big with ours. But as time has worn on, I've seen that we could have done it for a much smaller budget, but ours is set up that we can grow into that for 10 or 15 years and not have to, redo that infrastructure. And I really like that Jenna talked about, this is the beginning of something that's going to last forever. It's the new way to hold church. And I think we have to remember that that's a good thing, that this gives us the ability to really spread the teachings of Christ and grow our own church's ministries in ways we never imagined. And I encourage everyone, take baby steps. Have the big plan, but allow yourself to do it in increments so that way it's successful. And as you build confidence doing each one of those things, you can incorporate more, and just be positive and have fun with it and embrace it as a good change. Let me see here what we got. Okay. Can you speak to experience with supporting a pulpit supply preacher in one pastor church when the pastor is gone? Sandy, I don't know what you mean by that. I should know, but I don't.
Hey, Troy, it's Nikki.
Yeah.
I'll help you out there a little bit. Sandy, I think what you're asking is, when you have someone come in to cover for you when you're out of the pulpit, how do you get them on board with this technological leap? To background it a little bit more for you, Troy, usually what we're used to is you call up your pulpit supply pastor, they show up, they stand in the pulpit, they do their job, they go home. This is a whole new world, Troy, so I'll leave you with that hard question.
No, that's a good one, and I can actually draw from experience on that. During our virtual worship experience, we have an associate pastor who one of her responsibilities, she is our minister of visitation. She goes and visits all of our homebound individuals. Our senior minister took a week off for vacation, and our associate minister stepped in her place. What we did was for her was the week before, she came in, she watched how we did our process of recording. She came in, she watched Pastor Emily do everything, how we recorded it. We kind of coached her through how we did it. And then the following week, she came in and we recorded her session and put everything together. So what I would encourage is that if you're going to have someone fill in one week when your minister is gone, that if they're not a member of your congregation, if they're not someone who's there every week and sees it happen, have them come in and attend worship one time, watch it, and kind of get familiar with it, let them understand how it works, how they do it, but also to allow them to give you feedback on how they like to conduct worship, and then modify how you hold the worship to support what they do. That's a big thing. Let them know that, hey, you don't have to do it our way. Come with some ideas and we'll work together and we'll tailor fit how we put this together for how you like to conduct worship. But yeah, I think it's very important that they either go and watch some of your previous worships to get a feel for that. And hopefully when they find out, yeah, we live stream our worships on YouTube and everybody in the world can see you, they don't immediately say, no, sorry, I'm now unavailable. But just include them in the conversation, I think. I hope that helps as well.
And I can throw in, I'm
ahead,
also
Jenna.
a one pastor church, and sometimes I go on vacation to great distress from the congregation, but I have done that on occasion. And there are a few resources that I think are awesome. One is the National Church puts out whole worship services that you can use and that you can live stream, and it's rocking. And it does two things for your congregation. One, it's like a pre-made, you can just take the pieces and use them. And that's easy and fun. Hang on, Addie. But also it's a reminder to your congregation that they are part of a wider church. So it's a really cool opportunity to connect outside of your congregation. The thing that we did after that was to have everything handled by lay people except for the sermon. And we were able to have the guest preacher, if they were uncomfortable coming in person, to pre-record that part. And then the people in person and online watch the same video. Again, trying to fuse those two experiences. The third thing that I'm a really big fan of is if I'm out, and the church is actually gonna do this summer, so I'll let you know how it goes. Everyone is supposed to go to someone else's live stream. Everyone is supposed to go out and visit a friend's church, go with their friends, say, where do you go? What is your church doing? It sounds really friendly, but guys, it's just like secret espionage. We're sending out all our spies to find out what great ideas you have, and then we're gonna steal them. I wouldn't say do it every week, but if you have a pastor who's gone on occasion, or if you're having like a medical emergency, so many churches, UCC churches around the congregation are doing such great work. Go check them out, visit them, ask if you can join in fellowship. I know we've had a request from a few churches, and what we have done is always said, we, in the beginning of service, we welcome the church that's joining with us. If they're joining us online, has been just another creative way to rely on your covenanting churches. And if you do all those different things, you don't get the same thing every week. And then hopefully you don't have everybody dispersed visiting other churches. You don't have to rely on somebody pre-recording everything every week, or your guest members, but you can find a way. The piece that we are talking about every single week right now is that, like, when you are headed towards cruising altitude on an airplane, it's incredibly bumpy. And we are not anywhere near our cruising altitude. So every week is bumpy. And that is the goal, that God does not call us to comfortable, but God calls us to challenge with courageous attitudes. So just remind them that it's going to be really bumpy, and that's going to be okay for at least a little while. And maybe you'll get to cruising altitude in 2025. I don't know. We certainly won't.
Thank you for that, Jenna. That is very helpful. And again, she comes through with some great advice. And one of the things we'll talk a little bit next week about is, how to incorporate pre-produced or pre-recorded or elements of that nature along with your integrated technology. But that's a really great idea. We've done that several times with things for our virtual worship service as well, is having people record things on their phone at home, sending that and incorporating that as part of an event. We did several of those things for our Christmas service. We had several elements that were recorded by our congregation, and then we just had those ready to go. And you just go back and forth, almost like you're in a presentation. Oh, excuse me. Well, it doesn't look like we're having many more questions, and we're over our hour, and I know we've all got things to do, but I'm really excited to do this. I'm so happy so many of you came tonight to listen to me speak, and I hope that everything I've said has been helpful and beneficial for your thought process you put this together. Just a preview for next Thursday, what we're going to talk about. That one's going to be much more involved and much more specific as far as tools and technology. We're going to talk about cameras, microphones, computers, live streaming software, everything you're going to need, from just the bare bones minimum to, hey, we want to put on a major production. Everything we're going to need, and how that's all going to work together, how it's not going to work together, what we're going to run into that are potential hurdles we have to navigate through, and kind of avoid some of the obstacles that people who don't normally do this it just becomes the brick wall you run into, and you just don't know how to proceed. I mean, even when you research things online, sometimes people talk in tech jargon that's really above your head and just confuses you. We're going to go through all of that. And like I said, the great thing about this is there are so many options for live streaming software and equipment that you can really do something fascinating and incredible on a really large, on a small budget. And we're going to talk about all of that next week, and some of the things to experience. And like Jenna said, the idea of it's going to be a bumpy ride, but we're going to figure it out, and that's part of it. And we're going to make it through it. And we encourage everybody to come along for the ride. So one other thing I'll mention real quickly before I let everyone go. It was in the initial slideshow. I didn't show any examples of what we've been doing as far as our hybrid worship, but I'll show you examples of that next week. But you can actually visit our website. It's BethlehemUCC.org, or you can find us at Bethlehem EVV on YouTube. Our live stream worships are on there. You can get an idea of kind of the infrastructure of what we've got. I'll tell you real quickly, we have 4 cameras into a switcher that we can go between in our sanctuary because it's a larger house of worship. But I encourage you to go watch that. And like Jenna said, do some church shopping of your own, visit some other online churches, see what they're doing, get ideas. And thank you for sharing the link to our church in the chat. So that's about it for tonight. Thank you again so much for joining us. I'm very appreciative to have this opportunity, and I hope to see all of you and more next week.